Revenge Girls Stories.
I am Nora, 32 years old, and I will never forget that horrific family dinner. What started as our typical monthly gathering quickly turned into a nightmare when my father suddenly looked me in the eyes and asked, "Tell me, Nora, the $500,000 I gave you, what did you do with it?" I felt my body go cold. $500,000? What was he talking about? Across the table, my sister Aubrey turned ghostly pale, her fork frozen midway to her mouth. Before I could properly defend myself, the doorbell rang. The police had arrived. If you have ever experienced family betrayal, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button as I share how my perfect sister destroyed our family with one terrible decision. Teaching third graders was never going to make me rich, but it filled my heart with purpose every single day. My classroom at Riverside Elementary was my sanctuary, decorated with colorful art projects and educational posters. 22 eager faces greeted me each morning, ready to absorb knowledge like little sponges. I loved watching their eyes light up when they finally understood a difficult concept. Money might have been tight on a teacher's salary, but the hugs and hand-drawn cards made it all worthwhile. My family was another story entirely. My father, Kevin Matthews, built his financial consulting business from nothing into a regional powerhouse. Success defined him, and he measured everyone by their financial achievements. My mother, Shifra, a former marketing executive who became a stay-at-home mom, had long ago accepted her role as the supportive wife. And then there was my sister, Aubrey, 4 years older than me, and everything I was not. Aubrey worked as a senior loan officer at First National Bank. With her designer wardrobe, luxury car, and impressive investment portfolio, she embodied everything my father valued. Their conversations flowed easily, filled with talk of interest rates, market trends, and networking opportunities. When Aubrey spoke, my father listened with genuine interest, nodding approvingly at her financial insights. "Your sister understands how the world works," he would often tell me. "She knows what really matters." By what really matters, he meant money. Despite my education degree and passion for teaching, my career choice was viewed as little more than a hobby in my family. At our monthly family dinners, the conversation typically revolved around business and finance, until someone would eventually remember to ask about my little job. My answers about student progress or innovative teaching methods were met with polite nods before the conversation shifted back to more important topics. My closest ally was my colleague and friend, Jessica Parker. We had started teaching at Riverside together 5 years ago and bonded immediately. Unlike my family, Jessica understood the value of what we did. "Those who shape young minds hold the real power," she would say during our Friday coffee meetups. "Your father may create wealth, but you create future citizens." While Aubrey flaunted her achievements, I quietly saved for my own dreams. For 3 years, I had been putting aside money toward a down payment on a small condo. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom place I could call my own, away from the cramped apartment I currently shared with a roommate. According to my calculations, I was just 6 months away from having enough for the down payment on a modest unit in the Westbrook neighborhood. Every week, I met with my real estate advisor, Karen Wilson, who helped me navigate the intimidating world of home buying. "The market in Westbrook is heating up," she had warned me during our last meeting. "But I think we can still find something in your price range if we move quickly." The contrast between Aubrey and I started early. Family photo albums told the story clearly. Aubrey in dance recital costumes, tennis uniforms, and academic award ceremonies, always at the center of the frame. I appeared less frequently, often at the edges, holding a book or looking slightly away from the camera. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me, but Aubrey naturally commanded attention and approval in a way I never could. Growing up, I learned to exist in Aubrey's shadow. When she was named valedictorian, I sat in the audience between my beaming parents. When she graduated from an Ivy League business school, I organized the celebration party. She was always the star, and I was always the supporting cast. Yet, despite this imbalance, I maintained a relationship with my sister. We weren't best friends, but we met for lunch every few weeks, exchanged birthday gifts, and texted occasionally. There was tension under the surface, but I had accepted our dynamic long ago. I had my students, my savings plan, and my independence, even if my family couldn't quite appreciate their value. Little did I know that our carefully maintained family equilibrium was about to shatter completely.
The first hint that something was wrong came during our monthly lunch at Riverside Cafe, exactly 1 week before the fateful family dinner. Aubrey had suggested this trendy downtown spot known for its extravagant prices and Instagram-worthy dishes. I had grimaced at the menu prices, but said nothing, knowing this was Aubrey's way of subtly reminding me of our different financial situations. "So, how is the banking world treating you?" I asked as we waited for our food. Aubrey seemed distracted, her eyes darting around the restaurant as if looking for someone. "Fine," she replied curtly, fidgeting with her silver bracelet. "Just busy with some complex clients." Her phone buzzed on the table. When she checked the screen, her face paled slightly before she excused herself. "Sorry, I need to take this," she said, hurrying toward the restrooms. She returned 10 minutes later, looking visibly shaken. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the worry lines around her eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just work stress," she replied too quickly. "Nothing to worry about." Later that afternoon, I had to drop off some documents at my father's office for my mother, who was helping with an upcoming charity event he was sponsoring. As I approached the modern glass building that housed Matthew's financial consultants, I spotted Aubrey hurrying through the revolving doors. I called out to her, but she either didn't hear me or pretended not to. What was strange was that it was Tuesday, at 2:30 in the afternoon, a time when Aubrey should have been at the bank, not at our father's office. I delivered the documents to my father's secretary and casually asked, "Was that my sister I just saw leaving?" The secretary looked uncomfortable. "Miss Aubrey has been coming by frequently this past month. I thought you knew." 2 days later, my father called me, sounding unusually stressed. "Nora, did your mother mention anything strange about our bank statements to you?" The question caught me off guard. "No, is something wrong?" "Nothing to concern yourself with," he replied dismissively. "Just a banking error we're sorting out." That same evening, my mother called. Schiffer Matthews rarely called without a specific purpose, preferring to communicate through brief text messages or emails. "Your father has been acting strangely," she confided, her voice low as if afraid of being overheard. "He's been locked in his home office for hours making phone calls. When I ask what's happening, he just says it's business. But I know something's wrong. He hasn't been sleeping." The day before our scheduled family dinner, Aubrey texted the family group chat, "Maybe we should postpone dinner tomorrow. Work is crazy right now." My father's response was immediate and firm. "Dinner stands. Family comes first. We all need to be there." The unusual insistence in his message raised a red flag. Our monthly dinners were a tradition, yes, that rescheduling had never been an issue before. That afternoon, I went to my parents' house to help my mother prepare some dishes ahead of time. As I chopped vegetables in the kitchen, I heard raised voices coming from my father's study. Curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly moved closer to the partially open door. "You need to tell me the truth now." My father's voice was stern. "Before things get worse." "I told you I don't know what happened. Maybe there's been a mistake." $500,000 doesn't just disappear by mistake, my father responded, his voice rising. "I want answers tomorrow, all of us together." I quickly retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. $500,000 missing, and somehow Aubrey was involved. When I returned home that evening, I couldn't resist searching online for news about my father's company. The search results revealed nothing dramatic, but a business forum had a thread speculating about financial irregularities at several consulting firms, with Matthews mentioned briefly. One commenter wrote, "Heard from an insider that Matthews is having liquidity issues. Anyone know if there's truth to this?" As I tried to process what was happening, I ran into Walter Kingsley, one of my father's longtime business partners at the grocery store. He seemed surprised to see me and oddly formal. "Nora, how are you?" he asked stiffly. "I'm well, Walter. How about you?" "Managing," he replied, clearly uncomfortable. "Send your father my regards. These are challenging times." Before I could ask what he meant, he excused himself and hurried away, leaving me with even more questions. By the time I returned home, I felt a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Something was seriously wrong in my family, and for some reason, I had a terrible feeling I was about to be caught in the middle of it.
The day of our family dinner arrived with dark clouds threatening rain, matching my apprehension perfectly. I had spent extra money I couldn't really afford on a bottle of my father's favorite whiskey as a gift, wrapped in elegant blue paper. Despite our complicated relationship, I always tried to maintain peace through these small gestures. I arrived at my parents' colonial-style home 30 minutes early, hoping to help my mother with final preparations. The house was unusually quiet as I let myself in with my spare key. "Mom?" I called out, setting my purse and the wrapped bottle on the entryway table. No answer. I moved through the house, eventually hearing muffled sounds from my father's home office. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see Aubrey frantically rummaging through the desk drawers. "Aubrey?" I pushed the door open. "What are you doing?" She jumped, slamming the drawer shut. "God, Nora, you scared me." Her normally perfectly styled hair was slightly disheveled, and her designer blouse had a small coffee stain near the collar, something the meticulously groomed Aubrey would never normally allow. "I was just looking for the tax documents Dad wanted to show me," she stammered. "He asked me to grab them before dinner." It was an obvious lie. My father kept his important documents in a fireproof safe behind the painting of our grandparents, not in his desk drawers. Something was very wrong. "Where are Mom and Dad?" I asked, choosing not to call her out directly. Mom went to pick up the dessert. Dad's in the wine cellar, choosing bottles for dinner. Aubrey brushed past me. I should go help him. By 6:30, we were all seated around the formal dining table, an antique cherrywood piece that had belonged to our grandparents. My father sat at the head, my mother to his right, Aubrey to his left, and me directly across from him. The table settings were immaculate as always, with the good china, crystal glasses, and polished silver flatware that only appeared for these monthly gatherings. The food looked and smelled delicious. Roasted herb chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, asparagus with hollandaise sauce, and fresh-baked rolls, all my father's favorites. Yet despite the inviting spread, the atmosphere was suffocating. My father had barely spoken since we sat down. My mother kept refilling her wine glass, and Aubrey seemed to flinch at every small sound. "How are the third graders, Nora?" my mother asked, clearly trying to generate normal conversation. I described our latest science project about ecosystems, where the children had created miniature biomes in recycled 2-liter bottles. Normally, my father would have made some comment about how I should be teaching the kids about financial literacy instead, but tonight he just stared at his plate, cutting his chicken into increasingly smaller pieces without eating. "And Aubrey," my mother continued desperately, "how was everything at the bank?" Aubrey's fork clattered against her plate. "Fine. Everything's fine. Just busy." My father finally looked up. "Busy with what, exactly, Aubrey?" The edge in his voice silenced the room. My mother took another large sip of wine. "Just the usual," Aubrey replied, her voice unnaturally high. "Loan applications, client meetings." "Interesting." My father set down his knife and fork with deliberate precision. "Because I had lunch with Thomas Gladwell yesterday, the regional manager of your bank, and he mentioned you've taken a surprising amount of personal leave recently." The color drained from Aubrey's face. I had some health issues, nothing serious. My father nodded slowly, then suddenly turned to me. His gaze was intense, almost accusing. Tell me, Nora, the $500,000 I gave you, what did you do with it? The question hit me like a physical blow. I set down my glass, certain I had misheard. I'm sorry, what? The money, Nora. My father's voice hardened. $500,000 transferred to an account in your name 3 weeks ago. What did you do with it? I felt the blood drain from my face. $500,000? What are you talking about? I never received any money from you. Across the table, Aubrey had gone completely still, her face ash white. My mother looked between us, confusion and fear evident in her expression. Kevin, there must be some mistake, my mother said softly. Nora wouldn't. My father stood abruptly, walked to the sideboard and returned with a folder. He slapped it on the table and flipped it open, revealing bank statements and transfer documents. No mistake. $500,000 transferred from our family business account to an account at Southwest Bank opened in Nora's name with Nora's signature and social security number. He pushed the documents toward me. Your signature, Nora, your driver's license number, your contact information. I stared at the papers in horror. The signature did look remarkably like mine, but I had never seen these documents before in my life. Dad, I swear to you, this wasn't me. I never opened this account. I never received this money. This isn't my signature. Then explain how your personal information is all over these documents. Explain how the security camera at Southwest Bank shows someone matching your description opening this account. Explain how the money was then wired to 4 different offshore accounts within 48 hours. Aubrey suddenly stood up. I need to use the restroom. Sit down, my father commanded, his voice thunderous. Aubrey sank back into her chair, trembling visibly. I think, my mother said, her voice quavering, we should all take a moment to calm down and discuss this rationally. I've been calm for 3 weeks, my father replied coldly, ever since our accountant discovered the missing funds. I've been investigating quietly, hoping there was an explanation, hoping I was wrong about what I found. He turned back to me, eyes blazing. Was it gambling? Drugs? A boyfriend with expensive tastes? Tell me what was worth stealing from your own family. I didn't take anything, I protested, tears beginning to form. Dad, you have to believe me. I've been saving for years just to afford a tiny condo. Do you really think I would risk everything for money? The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. My father checked his watch. Right on time. That would be Detective Roberts and Officer Patel.
My mother gasped. You call the police, Kevin? No. This isn't just a family matter anymore, Shifra. This is grand theft. He stood and walked toward the front door. Someone is going to jail tonight. The 2 officers followed my father into the dining room. Detective Roberts was a tall woman with short gray hair and penetrating eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Officer Patel, younger and in uniform, stood slightly behind her, notepad ready. Thank you for your time, Detective Roberts said, her voice professionally neutral. I understand this is a difficult situation for everyone. Mr. Matthews has filed a report regarding a substantial sum of money transferred fraudulently from his business account. I couldn't believe this was happening. My entire body felt numb as Detective Roberts continued. Miss Nora Matthews, she turned to me. Based on the evidence Mr. Matthews has provided, including bank records and security footage, we have a warrant for your arrest for fraud and grand theft. This is insane, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I never took any money. My father slapped his hand on the table. The evidence is right here. Your signature, your information. The money traced directly to accounts only you could have accessed. Detective Roberts raised a hand. Mr. Matthews, please, I will handle the questioning. She turned back to me. Before we proceed further, I should inform you that you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. As she continued reading my rights, something unexpected happened. My mother, who had been quietly weeping, suddenly spoke up. Detective, before you take my daughter anywhere, there's something you should know. She reached into her purse and pulled out a slim envelope. I hired a private investigator 3 days ago when Kevin first told me about his suspicions. My father looked stunned. Shifra, what are you talking about? My mother's hands trembled as she handed the envelope to the detective. I couldn't believe Nora would do this. It made no sense, so I hired someone to look into it independently. Detective Roberts opened the envelope and scanned its contents, her expression changing subtly. She exchanged a look with Officer Patel before addressing my father. Mr. Matthews, did you provide us with all the security footage from Southwest Bank? My father frowned. I gave you what the bank provided me, the footage of someone matching Nora's description opening the account. I see. The detective turned to Aubrey, who was now visibly shaking. Miss Aubrey Matthews, I believe we need to ask you some questions as well. Aubrey's eyes darted toward the doorway, as if calculating whether she could make it outside before being stopped. I don't know anything about this, she said, her voice cracking. Detective Roberts pulled a photo from the envelope. This is a clearer image from the bank's security system showing the person who opened the account using Nora's identification. While there is a resemblance between the sisters, facial recognition software confirms this is you, Aubrey Matthews, wearing a wig styled similarly to your sister's hair. The room fell completely silent. My father took the photo with trembling hands, staring at it in disbelief. That's not possible, he whispered. Aubrey wouldn't. Detective Roberts continued. The private investigator also uncovered some other concerning information. She produced another document. Aubrey Matthews has accumulated significant gambling debts at Riverside Casino over the past year, totaling more than $300,000, and she also has 3 maxed-out credit cards and 2 personal loans that are currently in default. I stared at my sister in shock. Aubrey, is this true? Aubrey's composure crumbled entirely. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It started small, just a few thousand to cover some debt, but then it kept growing and the casino people were threatening me, and Apollo said he could help. Apollo? My mother asked. Who was Apollo? Detective Roberts consulted her notes. I believe she's referring to Apollo Williams. He's known to law enforcement for his involvement in several financial fraud cases, though we've never had enough evidence to make charges stick. He said it would be a small loan, just enough to get the casino off my back, but then he wanted more, and when I couldn't pay him, he came up with this plan. He said no one would get hurt, that the money would seem to disappear into overseas accounts where Dad's company wouldn't be able to trace it. He had all the connections, knew how to create the fake IDs, forge the signatures. And you decided to frame your own sister? I asked, my voice hollow with disbelief. I never thought it would go this far. I never thought Dad would actually call the police. I was going to fix it somehow, I swear. I couldn't find words to respond. The sister I had grown up with, competed with, envied in some ways, and pitied in others, was being led away in handcuffs for stealing $500,000 and trying to frame me for the crime. The perfect daughter had fallen, and our family would never be the same again.
The days following Aubrey's arrest blurred together in a haze of police interviews, legal consultations, and emotional exhaustion. I took a week of emergency leave from school, unable to face my students or colleagues, while my family name was splashed across local news outlets. Bank executive arrested for embezzlement from family business. Matthew's financial heir caught in $500,000 fraud scheme. Sister versus sister. Shocking betrayal rocks prominent local family. Despite Detective Roberts' assurance that I was cleared of suspicion, the damage to my reputation had already begun. Parents of my students called the school principal with concerns. My neighbors avoided eye contact in the hallway of my apartment building. Even Jessica, my closest friend, admitted that other teachers were gossiping. They know it wasn't you, she assured me over coffee in her apartment, the only place I felt safe from prying eyes. But you know how people love drama. It will blow over. But would it? My family had been prominent in our community for generations.
The Matthews name had always been associated with success, integrity, and financial acumen. Now it was synonymous with scandal. The investigation revealed layers of deception I could never have imagined. Aubrey had been gambling heavily for almost 2 years, starting with weekend trips to Riverside Casino with colleagues and escalating to secret weeknight visits when the losses began to mount. She had taken out multiple high-interest loans to cover her debts, using her position at the bank to obscure the paper trail. When that wasn't enough, she met Apollo Williams, a charismatic con man who specialized in identifying desperate people with access to money. He had approached her at the casino, offering solutions that seemed too good to be true because they were. Williams is a professional, Detective Roberts explained during one of our many interviews. He's worked similar schemes across 3 states. He identifies vulnerable targets with access to significant funds, builds their trust, then manipulates them into becoming accomplices rather than victims. That way, they're too implicated to report him when things go south. Aubrey was being held at the county detention center, unable to make the $500,000 bail the judge had set, given the severity of the charges and the missing funds. My parents visited her daily. I couldn't bring myself to go. Not yet. My father aged years in mere days. The confident, sometimes arrogant man who had built a financial empire now moved like someone carrying an impossible weight. When we spoke, he could barely meet my eyes. "I should have known," he said repeatedly. "All the signs were there. The sudden expenses, the evasive answers, the changes in behavior. I was so blind." My mother alternated between grief and fury. "How could she do this to us, to you?" she asked me one evening as we sat in their kitchen, the dining room still untouched since that terrible night. "Where do we go wrong with her, Nora?" I had no answers. I was still processing my own feelings of betrayal and confusion. The sister who had always seemed so perfect, so together, had been living a double life of addiction and mounting desperation. The sister who had looked down on my modest teacher's salary and simple lifestyle had been drowning in debt and poor choices, and she had been willing to let me take the fall for her crimes. The professional fallout was severe as well. My principal, Dr. Harriet Chen, called me into her office my first day back. "Nora, you know I support you, and legally, you've been cleared of any wrongdoing. But several parents have expressed concerns about having their children in your classroom given the publicity." My heart sunk. "What does that mean?" She sighed. "For now, I think it's best if you take on a curriculum development role, just temporarily, until this blows over. You'll still be employed, still be paid, but not directly teaching until the situation resolves." In other words, I was being hidden away. My career progress stalled through no fault of my own. Meanwhile, the search for Apollo Williams intensified. Police discovered he had fled the country just hours after Aubrey's arrest, likely tipped off by an associate. Interpol was involved now, as the money trail led through accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. The private investigator my mother had hired, a retired police detective named Michael Reeves, continued to work with law enforcement, piecing together the extent of Apollo's criminal network. His findings were disturbing. "Your sister isn't his first victim/accomplice," Reeves told us during a briefing at my parents' home. "We've identified at least 7 others in similar situations over the past 5 years. Typically, he finds people with gambling problems who work in financial institutions. He builds a relationship, sometimes romantic, sometimes as a mentor figure, and gradually entangles them in his schemes." "Will they be able to catch him?" my mother asked. Reeves hesitated. "It's possible, but men like Williams are slippery. They have escape plans, fake identities, cash reserves hidden where even the best forensic accountants can't find them." As the investigation continued, I received an unexpected letter delivered to my apartment. It had no return address, but the handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably Aubrey's.
With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a 5-page handwritten confession detailing everything: how she had started gambling to impress colleagues, how the thrill of winning had hooked her, how quickly it spiraled out of control. She described meeting Apollo at the casino bar after a particularly devastating loss, how he had seemed like her salvation. Their relationship had evolved from financial advisor to romantic partner, though she now recognized his affection had been entirely manipulative. I know you may never forgive me, and I wouldn't blame you, but you should know that using your identity wasn't my idea. It was Apollo's. He said we needed a contingency plan, someone who could take the fall if things went wrong. When he suggested you, I protested at first, but he kept working on me, telling me you would never actually get in trouble, that Dad would protect you, that it was just insurance we would never need to use. The letter ended with a warning that chilled me to the bone. Be careful, Nora. Apollo knows who you are, and he blames you for the plan falling apart. Police protection won't last forever. He holds grudges, and he's more dangerous than I ever realized until it was too late.
I immediately called Detective Roberts and handed over the letter. She arranged for additional patrols near my apartment building and advised me to stay with friends or family for a while. That night, as I packed a bag to stay at my parents' house, I received a text from an unknown number. You think this is over? It's just beginning. Nobody crosses Apollo Williams and walks away. Nobody. After 2 weeks of living in fear, jumping at shadows, and sleeping poorly, I made a decision. I couldn't continue being a victim. I couldn't let Apollo Williams control my life from wherever he was hiding. If the authorities couldn't catch him quickly enough, perhaps I needed to help move things along. You want to do what? Jessica stared at me across her kitchen table, coffee forgotten between us. I want to help catch Apollo Williams, I repeated, more confident now that I had said it out loud. The police are doing their best, but they have procedures, limitations. I have something they don't. And what's that, exactly? She asked skeptically. Personal motivation and access to Aubrey. I had finally decided to visit my sister in the detention center. The sterile visitation room, with its scratched plexiglass divider and uncomfortable metal stools, felt appropriately cold for our first conversation since her arrest. Aubrey looked terrible. Her designer clothes had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit. Her perfectly highlighted hair now hung limp and dull, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. When she saw me, she burst into tears. I didn't think you would come, she managed between sobs. I almost didn't, I admitted, but I need answers, Aubrey, real ones, not what you've told the police or what you wrote in your letter. I need to understand how my own sister could do this to me. For the next hour, Aubrey poured out the whole sordid story. The gambling had started innocently enough, just weekend entertainment with work friends. But the rush of winning became addictive, and soon she was visiting the casino several times a week, placing larger and riskier bets. When the losses began to pile up, she took out loans to cover them, confident that a big win would solve everything. She said, I was so sure I could fix it myself. I didn't want Dad to know I had failed. You know how he is, how he always held me up as the successful one. I couldn't bear to disappoint him. Apollo came like an answer to her prayers, offering to help restructure her debt, introducing her to people who could extend private loans outside the banking system. By the time she realized she had fallen into a trap, she was already too deeply implicated to go to the authorities. He has everything on his phone, Aubrey revealed. Records of all his scams, all his victims. He called it his insurance policy in case any of us ever turned on him. He said if he went down, we all would. This was the first real lead I had heard. His phone. What kind? Did he back it up to the cloud? Did he ever let you use it? My questions came rapidly, my mind already forming the beginnings of a plan. Aubrey seemed surprised by my intensity. It was a black smartphone with a custom case. He was obsessive about it, never let it out of his sight. But he did mention something about backups in a secure server somewhere in Eastern Europe. Did he have any regular habits? Places he frequented? People he trusted? I pressed.
He has a cousin in Vancouver he mentions sometimes, and there's a coffee shop downtown called Blue Note where he liked to meet people. Said the background noise made it harder for anyone to record conversations. She leaned forward. Nora, what are you planning? Whatever it is, don't. Apollo is dangerous. He has connections with some scary people. I didn't share my thoughts with her. The less she knew, the better, both for her safety and for the credibility of my plan. Over the next week, I worked closely with Detective Roberts, sharing what Aubrey had told me and proposing a strategy. You want us to use you as bait? The detective was not impressed. Absolutely not. Williams is not just a con man. He has violent associates. This isn't a game, Ms. Matthews. I'm not suggesting you put me in physical danger, I argued. But we know he's monitoring the situation. He's already texted me threats. What if we use that to our advantage? What if we make him think I have something he wants? After much debate and planning, a modified version of my strategy was approved. The police would create a controlled digital footprint, suggesting I had discovered information about Apollo's other operations, information that could be valuable to both law enforcement and his criminal associates. The hope was that Apollo's ego and self-preservation would lead him to make contact, giving the cybercrimes unit a chance to trace his location. For 3/10 weeks, I lived a carefully scripted online life, making private searches that were designed to be discovered, having confidential conversations on monitored lines, visiting locations known to be connected to Apollo's network, all while under close police protection, of course. Then came the contact we had been waiting for, not from Apollo directly, but from someone claiming to represent him. Williams has a proposition: information exchange. You have things he wants. He has things you want. Tomorrow, Blue Note Cafe, 10 o'clock, come alone or the deal is off. Detective Roberts and her team spent the night preparing me and setting up surveillance. You won't actually be alone, she assured me. We'll have officers positioned throughout the cafe and on the street. At the first sign of trouble, we move in. Your only job is to keep the conversation going long enough for us to trace any calls or messages to Williams himself. The next morning, wearing a concealed wire and with a tracking device in my purse, I entered the Blue Note Cafe precisely at 10 o'clock. The place was busy with the morning rush, laptop workers occupying most tables, the buzz of conversation and espresso machines creating the audio cover Apollo apparently preferred. A man in a gray suit waved me over to a corner table. He was middle-aged, unremarkable looking, with thinning hair and glasses, not at all what I had imagined based on Aubrey's descriptions of Apollo's associates. Miss Matthews? He greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thank you for coming. My name is irrelevant, but you can call me John. Where's Apollo? I asked directly, sliding into the seat across from him. Mr. Williams is understandably cautious about personal appearances at the moment. I'm here to determine whether a direct meeting would be worthwhile. The conversation that followed was a careful dance of implied knowledge and veiled threats. John wanted to know exactly what information I had while offering vague promises about helping Aubrey's legal situation in return. I followed the script Detective Roberts had prepared, hinting at knowledge of Apollo's server locations and other victims, without revealing that I knew very little of substance. After 20 minutes, John seemed satisfied. I will convey your position to Mr. Williams. If he's interested in pursuing this discussion, you'll be contacted with further instructions. He left without ordering anything, disappearing into the morning crowd.
Detective Roberts joined me moments later. We got it, she said quietly, excitement evident despite her professional demeanor. The phone he was using connected to a VPN, but our tech team managed to get through it. We have a location on Williams, Vancouver, just as your sister suggested. The Canadian authorities are moving in now. 48 hours later, Apollo Williams was in custody, apprehended at his cousin's luxury apartment overlooking English Bay. His phone and laptop were seized, providing authorities with evidence not just of his scheme with Aubrey, but of numerous other frauds across multiple jurisdictions. Most importantly for my family, the data helped trace most of the missing $500,000, much of which would eventually be recovered. When the news of Apollo's arrest reached Aubrey, she agreed to full cooperation with prosecutors in exchange for consideration during sentencing. Her testimony would be crucial in bringing down not just Apollo, but several of his associates who had operated the larger money laundering network. My father, who had barely spoken during these difficult weeks, finally called me. "Nora," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Detective Roberts told me what you did, how you helped catch this man. I don't have the words to express how wrong I was about you, how sorry I am for ever doubting you." It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from him, and somehow, despite everything, it mattered. "I'm still your daughter, Dad," I replied simply. "That hasn't changed." The investigation revealed the full scope of Apollo's operation. He had been running similar schemes for over 6 years, targeting vulnerable people and financial institutions across North America. His network included forgers, hackers, and money launderers who helped move stolen funds through complex international channels. Detective Roberts explained the details during our final interview. Williams operated like a spider in the center of a web. He would identify targets through casino contacts, social media monitoring, and inside information from previous victims. Once he found someone suitable, usually someone with gambling debts and access to money, he would spend months building trust before proposing his schemes. The phone data revealed communication with at least 12 other victims, including a bank manager in Seattle, an accountant in Phoenix, and a credit union officer in Toronto. All had been manipulated into similar frauds, with varying degrees of success for Apollo. Your sister was actually one of his bigger scores. The $500,000 theft was among the largest single transactions we've found evidence of. Most of his other schemes involved smaller amounts, $50,000 to $100,000, which made them less likely to trigger intensive investigations. As the legal proceedings began, I found myself in the unusual position of being both a victim and a key witness. Apollo's defense team tried to argue that he had been manipulated by Aubrey, painting her as the mastermind and him merely a tool she used to access the money. The evidence from his phone, however, told a very different story. Text messages between Apollo and Aubrey showed clearly who was in control. He coached her through every step of the fraud, provided the fake ID materials, and gave specific instructions on how to forge my signature. More damning were his communications with other victims, which followed identical patterns of manipulation and control. During one court hearing, I finally saw Apollo Williams in person for the first time. He was smaller than I had imagined, probably in his early 40s with an unremarkable appearance that I suppose helped him blend in and gain people's trust. When our eyes met across the courtroom, he showed no emotion, no remorse, no acknowledgement of the damage he had caused to my family. His lawyer attempted to question me about my relationship with Aubrey, trying to suggest that I might have known about her financial problems and could have been complicit in some way. But Detective Roberts had prepared me, and the evidence spoke for itself. The forensic analysis of the bank footage, the timing of events, and my complete lack of any financial benefit from the crime made their insinuations fall flat. Apollo Williams was ultimately sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, with additional charges pending in Canada and other jurisdictions. The judge cited the sophisticated nature of his schemes, the large number of victims, and his complete lack of remorse as factors in the lengthy sentence. "Mr. Williams," the judge said during sentencing, "you preyed upon vulnerable people during their most desperate moments. You exploited their trust, destroyed families, and showed callous disregard for the consequences of your actions. This court finds your behavior to be among the most cynical and destructive forms of white-collar crime." As for Aubrey, her cooperation with prosecutors resulted in a more lenient sentence than she might have otherwise received. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 2 years, given her cooperation, her genuine remorse, and the fact that she had been manipulated by a career criminal. The day of her sentencing, I attended court to hear the judge's decision. Aubrey had lost weight during her months in detention, and the orange jumpsuit made her look younger and more vulnerable than I had ever seen her. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, she turned toward where I sat in the gallery. "I want to apologize to my sister Nora," she said, her voice barely audible. "I betrayed her trust in the worst possible way.
I let my pride and my addiction drive me to choices that nearly destroyed an innocent person's life. I know words aren't enough, but I hope someday she might find it in her heart to forgive me. I felt tears on my cheeks as she spoke. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the fear and the damage to my reputation, she was still my sister. The road to rebuilding our relationship would be long and difficult, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like it might be possible. The financial recovery process took months, but eventually about $400,000 of the stolen money was traced and returned to my father's business. The remaining $100,000 had been moved too quickly through too many accounts to recover, but the insurance company covered most of that loss. More importantly, from the investigation, had uncovered weaknesses in the bank's security procedures that led to policy changes designed to prevent similar frauds in the future. Aubrey's former employer implemented new verification procedures for large transactions and additional oversight for employees showing signs of financial distress.
Slowly, our family began the painful process of healing. With Apollo behind bars and most of the money recovered, I could finally focus on rebuilding my life piece by piece, stronger than before. 6 months after Apollo Williams' arrest, I stood in the empty living room of my new condominium, still amazed that it was really mine. The space was small but bright, with large windows overlooking a tree-lined street in the Westbrook neighborhood. My furniture was minimal, mostly secondhand pieces Jessica had helped me refinish, but the place felt like home in a way no other space ever had. The journey to this moment had been unexpectedly complicated. While the majority of the stolen funds were eventually recovered, the legal process was slow. My father, in a gesture that surprised everyone, had given me a portion of his own savings to make up the difference for my down payment. "Consider it an investment in your future," he had said gruffly, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional weight of the moment, "and perhaps a small repayment for what you endured because of our family." My weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Sofia Alvarez had become a cornerstone of my healing process. Initially reluctant to seek help, I now looked forward to our conversations, which helped me process not just the recent trauma, but the long-standing family dynamics that had contributed to it. "What you experienced wasn't just a betrayal by your sister," Dr. Alvarez had explained in one pivotal session. "It was the collapse of a family mythology that had been constructed over decades. The perfect, successful daughter versus the ordinary, less valued one. When that narrative shattered, it forced everyone, including you, to reconsider their place and purpose." My relationship with my parents had transformed in unexpected ways. My father, humbled by his failure to see what was happening with Aubrey and his wrongful accusation against me, made genuine efforts to understand my life and choices. He attended my school's open house night, actually listening as I explained my teaching philosophy and goals for my students. For the first time, he seemed to recognize that success could be measured in more than just dollars. My mother had found her voice again. After decades of deferring to my father in all major decisions, she from Matthews had stepped up during the crisis in ways none of us expected. She had hired the private investigator who first uncovered Aubrey's involvement, insisted on maintaining contact with Aubrey despite the shame and pain, and ultimately been the emotional anchor that kept our family from completely disintegrating. "I spent too many years being defined by my father's success and your sister's achievements. When everything fell apart, I realized I had my own strength. I just never had reason to use it before," she told me over lunch one day. As for Aubrey, our relationship remained complicated. I visited her in prison once a month, our conversations gradually evolving from awkward and tense to something approaching honest. She was participating in gambling addiction programs and financial responsibility courses, working toward a future that would look very different from her previous life. "I always envied you, she confessed during one visit, surprising me. Your clarity of purpose, your contentment with your choices.
I was always chasing the next promotion, the next status symbol, trying to fill something I couldn't even name. I envied you too, I admitted. The ease with which you won Dad's approval, your confidence, your apparent success. Apparent being the key word, she said with a sad smile. None of it was real. I was drowning and too proud to ask for help. With the compensation from the recovered funds and my father's gift, I had finally achieved my dream of homeownership. But more importantly, I had returned to teaching. The board had reinstated me to my classroom after a formal review cleared my name completely. I channeled my experience into creating a new financial literacy curriculum for elementary students, teaching basic concepts about money, saving, and making responsible choices in age-appropriate ways. The program was so successful that other schools in the district began adopting it, and I was invited to present the methodology at an educational conference. When I mentioned this to my father during our weekly phone call, his response brought tears to my eyes. Now that, he said warmly, is the kind of financial innovation I can truly be proud of. The most unexpected development came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I received a small package at school. Inside was a simple silver keychain with a small charm shaped like a house and a note in my father's handwriting. For new beginnings and doors that open to better places. I'm sorry it took me so long to see your value. Love, Dad. That evening, as I arranged books on my new shelves and pinned photographs to my bulletin board, I reflected on the strange, painful journey that had led me here. A journey that began with betrayal and accusation had somehow resulted in greater authenticity and truth than my family had ever known before. The following weekend, my parents came for dinner at my new place, the first of what would become a monthly tradition to replace the formal dinners of the past. As we sat around my small table, eating pasta made from my grandmother's recipe, the conversation flowed more naturally than it ever had. To new beginnings, my father toasted, raising his water glass since he had given up alcohol as part of his personal changes. And to truth, my mother added. To finding strength we didn't know we had, I concluded. Later, after they had gone, I stood on my small balcony looking at the night sky, feeling a sense of peace that had been missing for too long. The family mythology had been painfully shattered, but from its pieces, we were building something new, something real. My professional life also flourished in unexpected ways. The principal, who had initially hidden me away from teaching, approached me with an offer to head the district's new character education initiative. The irony didn't loss on me. The teacher who had been suspected of theft was now being asked to help develop programs about integrity and moral decision-making. Your experience gives you credibility that can't be taught, Principal Chen explained. Students need to hear from someone who has faced real challenges and come through them with their values intact. I accepted the position, which allowed me to split my time between classroom teaching and curriculum development. It was challenging work, but it felt meaningful in a way that connected directly to what I had learned about myself and my family.
2 years into Aubrey's sentence, she became eligible for parole. The parole hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late spring, and despite my complicated feelings, I decided to attend. My parents had asked me to come, and I felt it was important to be there for this next chapter in our family's story. The hearing room was small and sterile, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale. Aubrey sat at a table with her court-appointed lawyer, wearing a simple blue dress that my mother had brought for the occasion. She had lost weight during her incarceration, and her once perfect hair was now cut shorter and styled simply. But what struck me most was something in her eyes, a humility and groundedness that had never been there before. The parole board asked detailed questions about her rehabilitation, her plans for reintegration, and her understanding of the harm she had caused. Aubrey answered each question thoughtfully, without the polished confidence that had once defined her public persona.
I spent the first year of my sentence angry, she told the board. Angry at Apollo for manipulating me, angry at the system, angry at circumstances. But my counselor helped me understand that I made every single choice that led me here. The gambling, the lies, the decision to frame my sister, those were my choices, and I have to own them completely. When asked about her support system, she glanced toward where our parents and I sat in the small gallery. My family has been more forgiving than I deserved. My sister Nora visits me monthly, even though I tried to destroy her life. My parents have never missed a visiting day. But I know that rebuilding trust will take years, maybe decades, and I'm prepared for that. The parole was granted, with conditions including continued counseling, regular drug and alcohol testing, and a requirement to pay restitution to my father's business. Aubrey would be released in 6 weeks. That evening, our family had dinner together at my parents' house, the first time we had all been in that dining room since the night of Aubrey's arrest. The atmosphere was different now, quieter but somehow more honest. I want you all to know, Aubrey said during dessert, that I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I know I have to earn your trust again. And I know that might not even be possible, but I want to try. My father, who had aged considerably over the past 2 years, reached across the table and squeezed her hand. He said, "We're family. That doesn't excuse what happened, but it means we don't give up on each other." Aubrey's release day arrived on a crisp October morning. I picked her up from the correctional facility, a moment I had imagined many times but still felt surreal when it actually happened. She emerged carrying a single bag containing her few possessions, looking small and uncertain. "Thank you for coming," she said as we drove toward the halfway house where she would spend her first 6 months of freedom. "Where else would I be?" I replied. The halfway house was in a converted Victorian home in a transitional neighborhood. Aubrey's room was tiny, with just a single bed, a desk, and a small dresser. But she seemed genuinely grateful for it. "It's more privacy than I've had in 2 years," she said, attempting a smile. Over the following months, I watched my sister navigate the challenges of reintegration. Finding employment with a felony conviction proved difficult, despite her education and previous experience in banking. Eventually, she found work as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit organization whose director believed in second chances. The job paid a fraction of her previous salary, but Aubrey approached it with a dedication I had never seen from her before. She arrived early, stayed late, and threw herself into learning every aspect of the organization's financial operations. "I'm actually enjoying work for the first time in years," she told me during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "There's no pressure to network or climb a ladder or impress anyone. I just do my job well and go home." Our coffee meetings had become a cornerstone of her reintegration. At first, they were awkward and stilted, both of us unsure how to relate to each other after everything that had happened. But gradually, we began to find our way to something that resembled a sisterly relationship, though it was very different from what we had before. Aubrey's relationship with our parents was also evolving. My father, who had once treated her as his golden child, now interacted with her more as an equal. He offered guidance when asked, but didn't try to fix her problems or shield her from consequences. My mother, meanwhile, had become Aubrey's strongest advocate for practical support, while maintaining clear boundaries about emotional expectations. "I love you unconditionally," she told Aubrey during a family dinner, "but trust and respect have to be earned back."
3 years after that terrible family dinner, I stood in my kitchen preparing for another monthly gathering, but this one felt entirely different. The formal dining room had been abandoned in favor of casual meals around my kitchen table or my parents' breakfast nook. The conversations were real now, sometimes uncomfortable but always honest.
Aubrey arrived first, carrying a bottle of sparkling cider and a bouquet of flowers from the farmer's market. She had moved out of the halfway house 6 months earlier, into a small apartment near her job. The place was modest, a studio with secondhand furniture, but she had decorated it with care and seemed genuinely proud of her independence. "How are the third graders treating you?" she asked as she helped me set the table. "They're amazing. We're working on a unit about community helpers, and yesterday one of them said she wanted to be a teacher like me when she grows up. It reminded me why I love what I do." Aubrey smiled. "I remember when you first started teaching. I thought you were settling for less than you deserved. I understand now that I was the one who didn't understand what real success looks like." My parents arrived together, my father carrying a chess set he had brought to teach Aubrey, something they had started doing during her incarceration and continued as a way to spend time together. My mother brought photo albums. She had become the family historian, documenting this new chapter of our lives with the same care she had once devoted to preserving our childhood memories. Over dinner, we shared updates from our lives. My father talked about his decision to scale back his business and focus more on financial planning for working families rather than just wealthy clients. "Nora's curriculum project got me thinking about who really needs financial education," he said. "It turns out there's more satisfaction in helping a teacher buy their first home than in managing another millionaire's portfolio." My mother had started volunteering at a women's shelter, using her organizational skills to help women leaving abusive relationships navigate practical challenges like finding housing and employment. "It's the most meaningful work I've ever done," she said. Aubrey shared news about her job and mentioned that she had started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, not because it was required anymore, but because she found value in the community and accountability. "I have a sponsor now," she said, "someone who went through similar experiences and came out the other side. It helps to know recovery is possible." After dinner, as we sat in my living room with tea and coffee, my father cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about something," he said, "about that night when everything came out. I accused Nora without hesitation, based on evidence that seemed clear, but wasn't the whole story. I've learned that truth is often more complicated than it first appears." He looked at each of us in turn. "I failed as a father that night. I failed to protect Nora from false accusations, and I failed to see that Aubrey needed help rather than pressure to be perfect. I can't change what happened, but I can commit to doing better going forward." "We all made mistakes," my mother said gently. "What matters is what we do with what we've learned." As the evening wound down and my parents prepared to leave, Aubrey lingered behind. "Nora, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. What I did to you was unforgivable, and yet you found a way to forgive me anyway. That means everything to me. Forgiveness is a process. I'm still working on it, but I believe people can change, and I've seen you change. That makes it possible." After everyone had gone, I stood in my kitchen washing dishes and reflecting on how far we had all come. The family mythology that had once defined us, successful daughter versus ordinary daughter, strong father versus supportive mother, had been completely dismantled. In its place, we were building something more honest and more resilient. If there's one thing I've learned from this ordeal, it's that the truth, however painful, is always less destructive than the most comfortable lie. My sister's deception nearly destroyed our family, but in forcing us to confront reality, it ultimately gave us a chance at genuine connection. The scars remain. I still sometimes wake up from dreams where I'm being arrested, and I know Aubrey struggles with shame and regret. But we've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting or pretending things never happened. It means acknowledging the truth, taking responsibility for our actions, and choosing to move forward with intention and hope. Have you ever experienced a painful truth that ultimately led to growth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video and subscribe to Revenge Girls for more real-life experiences and lessons learned. Share this video with someone who might be struggling with family dynamics or betrayal. Remember that healing is possible even from the deepest wounds. And sometimes the path forward begins with facing difficult truths. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own journey of discovery.